Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this first Monday Majlis of this academic year. It's my greatest delight to have a friend as our guest who is Regula. And so Regula is a wonderful academic and also a wonderful person. She's truly a friend. And I was thinking about how to introduce her, and it's so she has this Central European. I won't say German because it's because I'm Hungarian, so I won't say German. So I say this. She is part of this Central European tradition, which combines really big thinking with extreme philological accuracy. And so she has this, let's say, German thoroughness, but she combines this with an hilarious sense of humor, and also a genuine, generosity and modesty. And we know each other for well over a decade, I think. I'm very grateful to Regula also for this Majlis in this current form as it is, because the Majlis was invented by Rob Gleave when during COVID times, and the main reason was to keep our community together, and he had brilliant guests, and then I took over, and I was thinking how we can improve something which was already excellent. And then I had this idea of this unusual format, what we will have today as well, so that we have our guest. The first part of the Majlis is our guest talking about their own journey, which I find very, very liberating myself. But when I found it out, I didn't find it liberating at all. I was actually scared from my own idea, to the point I couldn't sleep at all. And I was at a conference in Berlin, and then I asked Regula, I think that the very next day I asked Regula whether she thinks it's a good idea or it's completely silly, and whether when I need someone as a guest, would she come? And then she said, well, she comforted me, she encouraged me, and then she said, whenever you need me, I'll come. And this is also something which I immensely admire in her, and I'm so grateful that when we organized this, first of all, I didn't invite her for I think, well, for over a year. She's not the person who will be offended for that. And then when I invited, we agreed on a date. I asked her the details. She immediately sent all the details. What I asked her, then we set up a date like this, and then we needed to reschedule, and then we rescheduled like this. And I'm saying this because Regula is actually very high in an administrative or actually leadership position. So people, well, even lecturers, we know we don't have time, and it's as everyone is running behind it. Well, at least I do. It's very hard to be so forthcoming with replies, and to be so easy to deal with, and being director of research, I think, of the whole faculty, or you are actually vice dean or something like this. I don't, and be as forthcoming. That's truly admirable. So I'm very grateful. It's a joy it was a joy even to organize it, not just to have you here now.
You're too kind as always, and I'm very happy to be here. And I hope we will have a pleasant evening together. But Istvan is too kind as always. Yeah.
Well, I don't have any doubt that we will have a good evening. So Regula. Sometimes the guests of this Majlis find difficult to talk about themselves, and Regula some of my guests told me I'm very comfortable about talking, and that makes my life easy. But Regula asked me to ask her questions. Luckily, she didn't ask me 5 minutes before, which happened to me in another Majlis. So I have set up a list of questions, which I ask her right now before the Majlis whether she wants to hear them, and she said no, let's go spontaneous, because then she would start to overthink the replies. So first of all, well, it's pretty obvious, at least for me, to ask you about your roots, your family, your background. It's always interesting where someone is coming from into our fields.
Yeah, thanks. As some of you will know by my first name, I'm Swiss by origin. That's why I got this very typical Swiss first name. If you ever meet another Regula, the chances are high that they are from Switzerland. So I come from a not very academic family. My father was a GP and my mother was a nurse, and I was kind of the black sheep of the family. Everybody else did sensible stuff, and I stayed at university for a long time. And my uncles and aunts all started asking, when will you start a decent job? Even when I had my PhD, they continued asking, when will you finally get a decent position? When will you leave university and start working? That was their always, every Christmas, their ongoing bother to ask, when will you finally start working? And that only ever stopped when I got the title of professor in front of my name when I moved to Berlin. And then they somehow decided that I was somehow acceptable. And obviously I did some work, and so that stopped at that point. So I'm from a very Swiss background. As far as I remember, there is nobody not Swiss around, which is quite unusual in Switzerland. Usually there are some people who have no Swiss background. In my ancestry, I don't find anyone. So at least I have a German husband. And we have four kids. 3 of them are still with us, while 1 has passed away. They are 14, 11, and nearly 8. So they keep me busy when I'm not busy with my job. And my background, what brought me, I think, to this field was that I was a keen reader, and I was also always very interested in learning languages, especially ancient languages. And then I traveled to Egypt when I was 16 and was very much bothered not being able to read the street signs. I could handle not understanding them because, okay, there were many languages I didn't know, but I was very bothered not being able to read them. So then I decided I had to learn Arabic. And that's what I did.
Yeah, well, I think being the black sheep is that must be a pretty familiar feeling for most of us in the family. Yes. I think in the Middle East you get a wave just by becoming a doctor. In Switzerland you have to become a professor in order to compensate for.
No, I still think that it would have been easier if I had become a school teacher. That would have been perfectly acceptable. Or, a banker, a craftsman, whatever. A serious working person. But being an academic was really out of everything that was, imaginable in my normal, hardworking family. So, yeah.
That's very interesting. You said something which I didn't know in the introduction, and it was actually, I don't even want to think about it because then I couldn't continue the whole discussion. So I didn't know about it. Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to ask you what led you to our field and of study, and you said already, which is I think a fairly unusual reason, street signs in Cairo. I at least had Mohammed Nasir Dome in Cairo to inspire me to this field, and the Green Dome, but
Yeah. Yeah,
you had
well, I
even
mean, it was the time of the Kuwait invasion, and so there was a lot of things going on, and we had CNN in this school floors, and so it was not that, the street signs were like the trigger, and then that led on and on, and I also convinced my father to join an evening class in Arabic, so my poor father had to learn Arabic as well.
did he? And did he learn it?
Well, I mean, we went to this evening class for, I think, a year or a bit more. And I mean, he's still able to say things like هذا كتاب هل هذا كتاب نعم هذا كتاب. So,
That's very useful basic knowledge for a GP in Switzerland. Yeah, a good start. Yeah, and what then if we can follow up after Had al-Kitab, where did you go, when which kitabs were and which people and which fields, or actually I don't even know what to ask after the street signs inspired you to specific fields within Arabic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I actually, when I decided I wanted to learn Arabic, but I also decided that I needed to know more about my own literature. So I actually did a major in German language and literature, and Arabic was my minor. And I never really could decide which I liked best. So for a long time I did both, and even for my PhD I did both. And after my PhD I got a research position in
Sorry,
medieval
Regula,
German.
how did you do both for your PhD?
Well, I did a PhD on the Pseudo-Aristotelian Secretum Secretorum, Sir al-Asrar. And so I did the German and the Arabic versions of that. And I got a co-supervision by Ulrich Rudolph and by a scholar of medieval German. Yeah, and I did a master's thesis in Arabic. So it was always a bit both. But then I got a research position in medieval German. I thought, well, that's it. So I'm a medievalist now, and I was quite happy. I didn't, it didn't bother me too much. Yeah, and then I got a job offer from Berlin, and so I ended up as an Arabist in the end. So yeah, it could have turned out another way if I didn't get the position in Berlin. Then I would now be a scholar of medieval German. But yeah, so yeah, so that's and about the people. I mean, I
Sorry, and
studied.
Regula, how did this happen? The Berlin thing. So you were established as a scholar as a medievalist, and how did you apply to Berlin at all?
I
Or
mean, I applied for a junior professorship in Berlin. I had this book on tafsir, which was my master's thesis. I had a couple of things, and well, it looks like the PhD, the combined PhD and the master's thesis together somehow convinced them that I was a decent Arabist as well. Yeah.
but then you had this aspiration to go for the Arabic, even when you were already in
It
another
looked
field.
like a great position. It was with Angelika Neuwirth, who, I mean, has got a name in the field, and it was there was a 10-year option, so I tried my luck, and yeah, I didn't think I would get it. It was just like, throwing my hat in, and yeah, luckily getting the position, and yeah. So that's how I ended in Arabic rather than medieval German.
Yeah, well, I think there is surely a lesson for many of us, especially for our PhD students, MA students, and well,
Yeah.
people
I would
who
definitely say, just if there is a position you think you really want, try your luck. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is you won't get it.
which is equal. There is, yeah,
Esteban, I
which has the
think your
same.
voice, your volume is very low. Maybe, yeah.
Mine?
Now it's better. Now
Okay,
it's
I
better.
apologize. So yeah, thank you, Ismail. So yes, and then actually not applying has the same effect as applying and not to get it. So by not applying, we already, yeah, there is this feeling that we didn't leave the failure of being rejected,
Yeah.
but in practice we rejected ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then okay, so in Berlin and then and also talking about positions and the career history side of it is of course very interesting, because that's about how to, well, the possibility of continuing our the work we do. But yeah, maybe continue this line, and but if you could also discuss it together or maybe separately with the different topics what you researched.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, my first field was tafsir and the study of tafsir and how tafsir works as a textual feature, not so much what the intellectual traditions are, but how do you comment upon a text? What do you do? What is worthy of commentary and what is not? And how do you build that up? So that was like my first route. Then I worked on the Pseudo-Aristotelian text, which is somehow not very philosophical, although it is attributed to Aristotle. So it's more of a mirror for princes. So that's somehow still something I enjoy very much, this field of mirror for princes, of teaching people how to behave in court, and perhaps not only the princes, but also the courtiers. And then while in Berlin, I wrote a book on dialogue as a literary form. So yeah, you see that literature is basically what interests me, or also literary forms are what interests me. And I dealt with knowledge transfer via this literary form of dialogue. So yeah, so I dealt with a lot of strange texts, including some on alchemy, and that somehow fit together with things I did in my PhD, because there is a chapter on alchemy in the Sira as well. And yeah, so afterwards I ended up with a project on alchemy, on a larger research project back home in Switzerland. Yeah, and so I'm still a bit stuck with alchemy, actually, and the occult sciences and all that kind of things. Yeah, but
So all these different fields of knowledge production and transmission and creation, with the common thread of examining as much the form, how they expressed, than the actual content.
yeah. Yeah, I think form is really what is what I find particularly interesting. So not only to ask what do the texts tell us, but how do they tell us what they want to tell us? Why do they assume a particular genre? How do they try to convince their readers? So that's always something that has fascinated me, because there are so many ways how you could write something. And yeah, authors choose a particular form. And so I think that is quite interesting, not to just think about content.
And is there something which you find, let's say, specific to Arabic or texts, which is across the different topics, or not specific to Arabic text, but still things that they share, and what are the big differences between the fields? Okay, that's just
that's a very good question.
To summarize, I don't know how many decades of scholarship.
That's I think a huge question. I'm not sure that there really is a good answer to that. But what I find striking is that most of my texts, they are very conscious of trying not to be fictional. So there is this idea that they want to suggest that this, whatever they tell, it has happened. It's a kind of reality that they are telling. And so there are very few texts that really are playing with the fictional. I mean, you know that better than me with Kalila wa Dimna and texts like that really play it, or also the maqamat. But many of the texts that I'm dealing with, they are usually making, they have a lot of signals saying this has truly happened and the peoples involved are these and these and then and then. So this idea that you somehow have to justify any literary endeavor as being not literary in the end, but as trying to reproduction of a reality. So I think that is perhaps something that is particular also to Arabic.
Yeah, and you are of course in a good position to make this comparison, knowing being a medievalist of the northern shores and further of the Mediterranean too. So yeah, okay, so that's you see a marked difference here.
Yeah, I would say so.
That's interesting. And what do you think? What's the reason for that? Okay, these were not planned questions. These questions come up as you talk.
No, I don't know. Yeah, I don't dare answer this question.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about given the format of the Majlis and the goals of the Majlis to help present and future scholars, young and not so young academics, is that if you could talk about the greatest challenges you had, whether you set them up to yourself or life or whomever or whatever, failures, if you want to talk about them, and the way to recover from them, and maybe separately or linked to this also the greatest successes you had, or you feel what was the most important, or but you can also talk about whatever you want, but I mean of course but it would be also a way to respond to this, to think about those which you think can give us lessons.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as for most of us, I mean, one of the huge struggles obviously was to juggle family life with my professional life, and that's somehow still ongoing. So I've been commuting for a long time between Berlin and Zurich, and that was not an easy time. Because I always felt I didn't spend enough time with my family. I missed all the school plays, and on the other hand, I didn't invest enough time in my job. So it was always on both ends. I felt somehow lacking and somehow not really fulfilling my ambitions. Looking back, I think I did quite well, and it somehow worked out. But when I was really in that situation, I felt that somehow it was always not really fulfilling, and Well, looking back, it probably was also a problem of lack of sleep. Now that my kids are older, I think lots of it was a problem of lack of sleep. And then also in Berlin, I had a strange position that wasn't very clearly defined. So it was called a junior professorship, but nobody really knew how that would go. It didn't really fit into the system. So I somehow also had to find my role in that specific position, which wasn't very easy. And I think what didn't help me is that I lack the ability to act diplomatically. So I was probably too often too blunt. So that I would probably change today. So I would be more diplomatic than I was back then. But perhaps that's also growing older. That makes you milder. Yeah, but I think, I mean, the specific failure, I would see that, yes, I missed all the school plays. That's a failure to some extent. I hope I haven't missed too many of them. No, I didn't miss all of them, but I missed too many, and that's something I can't move back. And yeah, so I'm trying to make up now. And successes, I mean, you know, I've got a permanent position in one of the nicest universities of Germany. I mean, what can I wish more? I mean, it's Tübingen is a very nice town. The university is great. I have wonderful colleagues. So, yeah. So I'm very, very lucky because it's not the usual thing to happen in German academia that you get a tenured professorship. So I know how lucky I am, and also when I compare myself to dear colleagues who also went through the German system and didn't end up with a permanent professorship. And I wouldn't say that I'm the better scholar. I was just somehow very lucky to be in the right position and the right time. So this is, I think, much of it has to do more with with specific situations that somehow favored me and didn't favor others. So it was more at some point, it's not a question of success, but a question of luck.
Well, and of course, there is this obligation or this necessity to provoke luck, to provoke fortune. So to give her the chance to smile on us, keep applying, and then the more.
Yeah.
Yeah, we once nearly had you as a colleague, but by the time we managed to decide on this, you accepted another position. So it's life is so unpredictable. It's incredible. But it was our fault and our miss. But yeah,
that's been a pity. I still think it would have been nice to come to Exeter, but my husband did not agree. So. Yeah.
Well, and then you are happy now in Tübingen.
You know, I mean, you know, with all the positions, there are pros and cons, and but basically, yeah, I mean, it's a great university.
So I wanted to ask you about life, family, work balance. If you want to say more about this, but you actually said already, and it was actually quite moving. What you identified as your biggest failure and loss, and then we can also talk, maybe, I mean, you on how to deal with the responsibilities of leadership, admin, research, and teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I got appointed as Vice Dean of Research a year ago. That was not an appointment I was looking for, but our faculty, the Faculty of Humanities, which is a very big faculty, we have more than 100 professorships, including then all the lecturers, readers, etc. So we are quite big with several thousand students, and we had real problems to appoint a dean, and I was asked whether I wanted to, whether I would not like, apply for the position as dean, and I said, well, look at how old my kids are. I'm not going to be dean of a faculty like that, where you have to like spend 2 or 3 or even more evenings doing representative things. That's not going to happen. And then when a dean's team actually was appointed, a man and a woman, which is very nice, so they are co-deans now, they asked me whether I wanted to become vice dean, and my first reaction was, no, I'm not. And my second reaction was, well, I mean, you cannot always say that we need more women in leadership positions and then decline every one that is offered to you. So they convinced me that they would like try to make it work, and that this would not be a position where I had to spend all my evenings at the university. And yeah, so I accepted the position, and I haven't regretted it, actually. I thought I might, because it also means that I teach less. And as I generally really enjoy teaching, I thought that would be a bit sad to teach less. But at the moment, I'm learning a lot about the functioning of the university, about background, about how committees work, and so it's quite interesting. I also learn more about the whole German academic field, funding things. So yeah, at the moment I'm enjoying it. It's good that I'm teaching less, because I didn't teach that much less in last winter, and that really nearly killed me, because it was really too much. Now I think it's should be more manageable, and yeah. Obviously, research is always a problem, because as a German professor, you teach quite a lot, even if you have reduced hours, as I do at the moment. So yeah, so research is always the last bit. But I mean, as it's kind of a hobby, you will always find time for it.
Okay. I don't know. Well, I truly wonder how you do, because that's really an art, and it looks you do it somehow with ease. I'm very far from that. I just don't know how to do any research during term time, and now admin duties eat up even my summer. So I just at awe how you manage to balance all
I
this.
promise you, I don't do a lot of research during term time.
Okay.
But there are semester breaks, so
Yeah, and of course, this is funny that that's something which looks completely arcane, perhaps for some people, like Medieval Mirror for Princes. They are actually very useful books. And then you can consider your time spent in committees as research, as part of your research, feeding into your understanding of the Mirror for Princes. And I guess whether conscientiously or unconsciously, you always apply what you learned. Maybe that's what makes that's why you can do this balance, because you learned so much about how to do in leadership positions and in advisory positions, that you actually learned it, and you put it into application.
Yeah. I will think about more jackals and lions in my next meeting.
Oh, I see them all the time. Luckily less in our meetings, but I mean, luckily our departments there aren't. But yes, elsewhere and of course when you look at politics, you see them everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, it's pretty frustrating. Do you feel that frustration sometimes when you look at news and then you see that this was old, even 1,000 years. This joke was old, or this tactic was way too old, even 1,000 years ago, and then you see it working and people being killed for things.
I mean,
which
we live in a very frustrating time right now, because we seem to be, well, back on field one, so to say. So it doesn't seem to be moving anywhere. So, yeah, I mean, I teach a lecture, a history of the Middle East, from more or less Muhammad to the present, and I realized that there are a lot of wars in it, and I always try to reduce the number of wars I mention, but there are a lot of that I somehow have to mention, and so I somehow feel that war seems to be the normal situation. That's very hard to accept. And I talked to this with my colleague in Zurich, Tobias Heinzelmann, who is an Ottoman scholar, and he said, well, yeah, he was just about, I don't know, what Ottoman-Russian war number, whatever, 20 or something. And so yeah, it is frustrating, because you would think that we are moving on, and it doesn't look like. Not really.
Yeah. Well, we traveled through Europe and stopped in many places, and then in Europe, in every single village, you see a memorial to people who died in the First World War and the Second World War, and every single village. Well, not in Switzerland, but in and here in England, Germany, back home in Hungary, it's just they died for nothing. And then what did these boys in these villages had to do in these wars? And but also when it's interesting also what we teach, because also as you cross Europe, you go to play through places, borders, and then battlefields. You know the places, that what happened there. But then there is also this continuity. And we talk about much less when it comes to history. We talk about what happened, and we tend not to talk about the non-happening or this long delay, slow action of how people really communicated when not in war. So there is a genuine tendency to focus on the violent events instead of the peaceful ones. Well, yeah, probably because the violence is the abnormal. So
that's the question.
Yeah, well, it is normal, but maybe less usual. So we focus on it. Let's hope. Okay, so I wanted to. Okay, the final two questions. One is well, what would you say if I ask who you are, Regula?
Oh, well, I probably would give you my name, and then probably would say, yeah, well, I'm an Arabist. I'm a mother of 3 children or 4 children, depending on in which mood I am. I'm Swiss living in Germany. Yeah, I'm a lover of books in all forms, and being Swiss, of chocolate and cheese.
That's lucky. And yeah, finally, what advice do you have to? What advice can you give to well, people at different parts of their career, how to do in this career of ours?
I think, I mean, we've been at one point always apply for jobs you want, even if you think you don't really fit, or you don't really fit well, or there might be someone who is better qualified. They might have an internal candidate. Yes, they might, but the internal candidate might just not come or not be available or whatever. So, and then try to finish that book. You know, it will never be perfect. Just finish it, even if it's not perfect. There is nothing like a perfect book. Every book has problems. You will find them in the moment you open the printed version. I found the moment I opened the printed version of my PhD, I saw all the mistakes, and I thought, well, I should have seen them earlier, but I didn't. But at least it's printed, it's out, it's on the market, and I think that is really a point. Don't try to make the perfect book. Try to make a book that people can read and discuss and use as a starting point for their own thoughts, rather than trying to write the perfect one, which will never happen. So less perfection.
Yeah. Well, also in the two are actually connected. There to apply and there to let it go. The research piece,
Yep.
what you are working on. Yes, it's both accepting imperfection, which is very hard.
Yes, it is. I mean, we would all love to do better work, and we also, I mean, we know very well where our shortcomings are and the shortcomings of our research, and that's not I mean, that the ideal scholar would, like, you know, produce a piece that has no shortcomings, but we are not living in an ideal world, and there are always things we have to juggle around, and so.
Okay, so this must be liberating for everyone listening to this, coming from Regula, from the position she is, and also from the background of being a Swiss scholar in German academia, and saying, don't try to achieve perfection. That's encouraging. Oh, okay. So yeah, well, I just wanted to mention once someone told me that they applied for a job, and as it happened, the lover of the person so someone was someone's lover, and that person should have won the position, but they broke the night before, and then the person who told me the story got the position. So there's always a chance to apply, even when it is absolutely decided who would get it. You never know. Okay, Regula, thank you very much. Thank you. And yes, now let's get to your talk.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk on Aydamir al-Jildakī and his natural encyclopedia, which is part of a larger research project here in Tübingen called Different Aesthetics. So yeah, that's just the background of it, and I'll share my PowerPoint with you. So there you are. Right. So, on Animals, Stones, and Alphabets, the 14th century Egyptian alchemist Aydamir al-Jildakī and his natural encyclopedia. Aydamir al-Jildakī is not commonly known outside the small circle of specialists of Islamic alchemy. So far, research on al-Jildakī is rather limited, although Manfred Ullmann called him one of the greatest scholars of the Islamic world already back in 1972, more than 50 years ago. While al-Jildakī has only recently sparked interest within modern scholarship, his works were well received in his own time and in the following centuries. Therefore, they offer an important insight into how nature and the natural sciences were conceptualized in the so-called post-classical period, a time when a growing number of Sufi orders and madrasas changed the mechanisms of knowledge transfer considerably but also a time of increased private book ownership. The work I will focus on today is also interesting as al-Jildakī's only known work that is not solely on alchemy. Instead, it may be understood as an encyclopedia of the natural world and can therefore be compared to similar texts from the European Middle Ages. In the following, I shall first give a short overview of al-Jildakī's life and works, and then discuss his natural encyclopedia. Right. As is the case with many Arab alchemists, little is known about the life of Aydamir al-Jildakī. The only sources for his life are his own works that give autobiographical hints. From these, we can deduce that he was still alive in 1367, which means that the often stated date of death, 743, 1342, is not correct. He traveled widely in Iraq and Syria, the Hijaz and Yemen, but also to the Maghrib and Byzantium. He started his writing career in the 730s to 1330s and completed works in Damascus, Cairo, Alexandria, and Gaza. The French Orientalist Henri Corbin has suggested that his nisbah is deduced from the village of Jaldak, some 18 kilometers from Mashhad in northeastern Iran. However, Nicholas Harris has suggested that he was more likely an Egyptian descendant of Turkish Mamluks. I have agreed with Harris until recently, when my colleague Sha'ban Hamadnallah, who is here with us, has brought to my attention several passages in works by al-Jildakī, where he talks about traveling to Egypt, which is somewhat odd if said by an Egyptian. I still think that an origin in Iran is somewhat unlikely, but the question of al-Jildakī's origin is pretty much open again. Al-Jildakī has authored 15 works on alchemy, mostly commentaries, and most of his works are well preserved in dozens of manuscripts. He himself names 5 of his works as the essence of his knowledge. 2 of these 5 are commentaries on well-known works of alchemy. The Ghayat al-Surur fi Sharh al-Shudur, the highest joy, the commentary on the splinters, is a commentary on the alchemical divan of the 12th century Moroccan alchemist Ibn al-Faras, while the Nihayat al-Talab fi Sharh al-Muktasab is a commentary on the best-known work of the 13th century alchemist As-Simawi al-Iraqi. The third of the 5 works is not a commentary, but includes one. Al-Burhan fi Asrar Ilm al-Mizan deals with the Jabirian theory of balance. The third part of it includes a commentary of a Jabirian work. The 4th and the 5th works of this quintessence are, according to al-Jildakī himself, the most important among the 5, and unsurprisingly, they are not commentaries. Number 4 is At-Taqrib fi Asrar al-Tarkib. This is a work on alchemical compounds. That's the Tarkib part of it. And finally, the last work mentioned as quintessential is Durrat al-ghawwāṣ wa kanz al-ikhtisās fi ilm al-ghawwāṣ, the diver's pearl and the distinctions treasure on the science of sympathetic properties. This is, to the best of my knowledge, the only work by al-Jildakī that contains only a short chapter on alchemy, as it is primarily a work on the specific properties, the ghawwāṣ, of the things of the natural world. Ullmann has called it a work on magic, but I will argue in the following that despite its focus on the specific properties, the ghawwāṣ, the Durrat, is a real natural encyclopedia with a much broader scope than just magic. The Durrat al-ghawwāṣ, as most of al-Jildakī's works, is well preserved in around 25 manuscripts. The uncritical edition of 2012, however, is based on a single manuscript that was not identified by the editor. Luckily, my PhD student, Mohammed Hossein Mohammadi Demne, whom I've seen somewhere on the screen as well, has been able to track down the manuscript the edition is based on as belonging to the Parliament Library in Tehran. In the 15th century, the Ottoman alchemist Ali Bek al-Izniki, better known as al-Muallif al-Jadid, the new author, wrote a continuation of the Durrat, which seems not to be extant. Ullmann has called the Durrat most likely the largest collection in the field of sympathetic properties. Sympathetic or specific properties, ghawwāṣ in Arabic, are properties that belong to a certain stone, plant, or animal specifically, that distinguish it unmistakably from others. The most prominent example is the magnet. The magnet has many properties. It is, like other objects, heavy and black. But its specific property is that it attracts iron, something no other thing does. Specific properties are relevant for magical practices, especially in the production of amulets. The efficiency of amulets is often based on the specific properties of things used, be they plants, parts of animals, or letters of the alphabet. The Durrat al-ghawwāṣ is a very well-structured work consisting of 2 parts with 6 chapters each. Part 1 deals with living, animate beings. Part 2 with the inanimate world. Part 1 begins with the human beings and then continues with different types of animals, from cattle and mounts to predators, birds, fish, snakes, and insects. Part 2 contains stones and minerals, medical substances and spices, desert plants, trees, grasses, vegetables, and flowers. These contents are to be expected for an Encyclopaedia of Natural Properties. Chapter 5 of Part 2, however, raises something new and unexpected. Under the heading في بيان أصول الحروف والجداول الفلكية ومعرفة أوقاتها والأسرار الغريبة والتخيلات العجيبة, al-Jildakī presents various occult practices from magic squares to talismans and alchemy. The book's last chapter is entitled Kashf al-Mudgham wa Hal al-Mubham and deals with secret names and alphabets. With these 2 last chapters, al-Jildakī treats topics that we would not usually call nature, and I will come back to this later. In the first part of the Durrat, al-Jildakī offers the classical hierarchy of living beings, from humans to insects, in accordance with Arabic zoological works, however excluding the plants that Aristotle would have included among the living beings as well. The structure of the second part is more difficult to understand. The focus here shifts from the structure of the universe, namely animals, plants, and minerals, to the actual use that may be gained from a natural thing. That the structure is somewhat lost may have been clear to the author himself, who explains that he has added a special chapter about milks, oils, meats, and fats because this makes the text more user-friendly. However, if he had wanted to structure the knowledge presented in a more practical form, the whole book should have been ordered according to applications, for example, the diseases. Despite being symmetric at first sight, 2 parts with 6 chapters, the Durrat is asymmetric as the first part on humans and animals is only about 100 pages long in the modern print edition, while the second part fills nearly 500 pages. Al-Jildakī addresses this imbalance and explains this second part is more useful than the first one, more voluminous, contains more drugs that are called compounds, written also in more words than the simple. The first part contains compound drugs only as exceptions, and from the exception we cannot deduce a rule. It was only necessary for me to treat the living beings before the inanimate because the simple precedes the compound. The benefit of the inanimate things are greater, and therefore this part of the book is longer. In focusing on plants as drugs, al-Jildakī seems to be a typical representative of Islamic medicine that mostly uses plants as the basis for drug preparations. Al-Jildakī considers the structuring and presentation of knowledge to be his main contribution. He is convinced that the Durrat transmits knowledge in a more comprehensible manner than the works of his predecessors. No, may God lead you and us on the right path. That the eminent among the ancients have written in their books about simple drugs, good spices, and herbs to be used, but I have not seen with any of them that he would have collected these as comprehensively as I have, or as well structured as me. Rather, they have left them in disorder, with no clear boundary between specific and non-specific properties concerning the sciences. When I realized this, I wanted to compile in my book that which would make finding and using easier. In this part, the Durrat presents a similar aesthetics of creativity as adab encyclopedias do. The goal is not to present new topics, new knowledge, but to choose from the known and structure this selection in a way to make its knowledge more accessible to the readers. The text is therefore rarely innovative, although I think it might be in the discussion of the specific properties of the four elements. As may be expected, al-Jildakī commences his work with a longish preface. And he says, "Praise be to God, who enlightens the hearts of his friends by his well-preserved mention, who grants them knowledge of the hiddenness of his real secret, and has let rise in their existence the sun of gnosis. By it they reach the pearls of the substances that were hidden, and by the quality of their thinking they dive into the treasures of gnosis. Through diving and the quality of thought, they are always outstanding. They are the elite because of the distinction they have reached through the closeness. Thus, they excel those who are below them, and through the hate of the levels, they are always successful." At first sight, this seems to be just another typical hamdana, as can be expected in the beginning of a preface. Yet, this is also the Durrat en us. Al-Jildakī here stresses the importance of knowledge and gnosis, and of hiding knowledge and revealing it to those who are worthy, the elite of God's intimate friends. That the friends of God, a classical term for Sufi saints, here is used for the audience of a natural encyclopedia, needs to be explained. I think that the elitist implication goes very well with the occult sciences, as goes the Sufi leaning. The closeness of the occult with Sufi thought is a general trend in the post-classical period, perhaps most prominent for the first time in the writings of Ibn al-Arabi. Al-Jildakī goes on to present the human body as a wonder. The well-ordered nature mirrors the cosmos and is a sign of God's providence and omniscience. To study nature means, so al-Jildakī suggests, to understand God and his work. It is a way of seeking God and eventually of gnosis. To those who strive for this goal, al-Jildakī's work is fundamental. So he goes on in his preface. "O you who stand on the beach of the sea of the secrets of the specific properties and wisdoms, who wonder when looking about the waves' movements in the writing of the nations, who, when thinking, wonders about the quality of the large pearl in this great sea and about the fetching of the pearl of gnosis from the shell of writings. I have accepted for you the task, have saved you from the pain of turning the letter, and have dived into the depth this pearl, to fetch this pearl, which is among the most glorious ever written and composed." So he has quite an ego. Al-Jildakī himself is the diver of the title, the pearl diver, the one who dives for the pearl of knowledge and will save his readers the trouble. Instead of having to dive themselves, of having to read the books of the ancients, they may now go for al-Jildakī's book. In the first part of his book, al-Jildakī discusses humans and animals as part of nature and God's creation. The perfection of their bodies is a sign of God's presence in this world. These bodies not only look wonderful, but they also have wonderful properties. An example of this is the following passages where al-Jildakī adduces the following recipe on the authority of Jabir ibn Hayyan, one of the founding fathers of Arabic alchemy. If a man takes a hair from his beard and something of his cut fingernails, adds this to nails of goats, burns this all, and gives this to the beloved in wine or beer to drink, this person will turn to the agent completely and will be unable to separate themselves from him. This recipe is interesting because it would usually be called plain magic, while al-Jildakī presents it as a practice based on the specific properties of the human body. This turn, I think, allows him to present knowledge that otherwise might be considered problematic. The close relationship to magical practices also becomes clear by the usage of ciphers in this recipe, which looks slightly different in the edition and in the manuscripts. So here you have the cipher, and I still don't know why the goats need to be written in cipher, so it's spell. And they are slightly different here. So the different things are written in ciphers in this Berlin manuscript, and again, different in this London manuscript. So there are ciphers in all the manuscripts and in the print edition, but they are not the same all over. So I haven't really found out how they work. I mean, I can read them, but I don't really understand what is written in ciphers. Ciphers are used throughout the text of the Durrat, and they are not always easy to decipher unless you are Manfred Ullmann, who calls them really simple. When dealing with animals, al-Jildakī does not describe the animals at all, nor does he explain their names. His interest is neither zoological nor philological, but focused on the specific properties of the animals. That the reader should know the animals mentioned is taken for granted. Interestingly, he also mentions animals about which he has nothing to say. For example, the crow. So this is the chapter about the crow, which is very short. The crow, I have not found for it any specific property, except that one says that if you eat it, it causes salivation during sleep. This, obviously, is a very specific property. I mean, what else would cause salivation during sleep? But I think al-Jildakī refuses to acknowledge this as a specific property because it's not very useful. I mean, why would you need nighttime salivation? Also, al-Jildakī is mostly interested in the animals for their specific properties and their benefits to humans. He is not an advocate of an exploitation of nature by man. Rather, he advises to act respectfully towards animals. So he says, be careful, avoid one day to try to befriend an animal because of a need that you want to satisfy. I mean, because of your attention for a specific property and because you do not see any other way to get that except by befriending an animal in order to take its specific part. In this case, you would be one of those who are satisfied with this worldly life, neglecting the afterlife. Friendship with animals, or perhaps with any living being, is a value in itself, something one has to aspire for beyond any material advantage it may bring. The Durrat's second part starts, perhaps not surprisingly, with the pearl. The wise Aristotle, the Greek, said, among the most beneficial precious stones are the pearls. In rank and price highest is the unique pearl. This is only found in the treasure houses of the kings, and they boast about it to each other. The titular pearl, Durrat, opens the chapter on the stones, the pearl that should be kept in the royal treasuries, khaza'in al-muluk. Clearly, the implied meaning here is that al-Jildakī's book, his pearl, should also be treated as a precious stone and kept in the treasury, or rather the library of kings, treasure house and library, both being khazina in Arabic. But al-Jildakī also discusses normal stones and metals, not just precious stones. Like precious stones, these ordinary stones may be engraved, a practice often discussed in this chapter. For example, the Indian Ishrasim said, "It is a remarkable secret that you take a marcasite stone, turn it into a gemstone, and engrave it in it the shape of a fish, a feather of a swallow, and under its foot a scorpion. On the reverse side of the gem, the same fish, the feathers of swallows and peacocks, and the leaf of mountain basil. Make a signet ring. Any animal will be subordinate to its bearer." The marcasite only gets its special power, its specific property, by the engraving. It is a cultural practice, the engraving of gems, that turns a natural thing, an ordinary marcasite stone, into something powerful that will make you the master of the animals. In the last chapter of his book, al-Jildakī discusses the specific properties of language and different scripts. Al-Jildakī himself seems to be aware that the inclusion of language and script is unusual for an encyclopedia of animate and inanimate beings. He therefore explains that the letters are indeed just as much part of the jamad, the inanimate things, as are the plants and stones, and that they therefore need to be included with them. If this is true, if the letters are part of the jamad, then they are part of nature. They are not man-made, artificial, culturally defined, but natural and created by God. By the same turn, this is also the reason why they are powerful. The letters, as natural objects, have their specific properties, which can be used to one's own goals. Following this introduction, the author presents 72 different alphabets. In the print edition, these are taken completely from the Kitab Shawk al-Mustaham, a work attributed to Ibn Wahshiyya, the 10th century author of Nabatean agriculture. In manuscript form, the passages are not identical to the Ibn Wahshiyya text, although there are similarities. In any case, al-Jildakī stresses that there are exactly 72 alphabets. 72 is the number of languages after the Babylonian confusion, the number of Islamic sects, and the number of letters in God's most beautiful names. This is therefore not a number chosen randomly, but deliberately, a number that indicates the special relation between the letters and the divine world order. Now we have walked through the text once, but what kind of text is it anyway? The Durrat al-ghawwāṣ is not easily classified, as it combines diverse elements in an unexpected way. However, I would dare oppose Manfred Ullmann and his classification of the Durrat as a magical compendium of the specific properties. Yet it is also not a typical natural encyclopedia. Rather, I would call it a human-centered natural encyclopedia. Nature is of interest for its interaction with and effect on mankind. Seemingly man-made things like alphabets and engraved stones are treated as natural objects because they have, like animals, plants, and stones, secondary effects that are beyond their primary intended functions and that are derived from the properties instilled in them by God. These objects or things are therefore also to be counted among God's creations. They are not artificial, do not belong to culture, but nature. It might be typical for a post-classical author like al-Jildakī that he uses a broad selection of sources and often cites older authorities. He refers to the Quran and Hadith, but he also uses Aristotle and invokes Muslim physicians, not least Ibn Sina. He cites the Sufi scholar and magician al-Buni, just like the theologian and Sufi al-Ghazali. His Encyclopaedia is not least an endeavor meant to structure knowledge, a knowledge that in its new order is reflecting and perhaps recreating God's order of the universe and the beauty of the cosmos. The literary work is a reenactment of God's nature for an audience of readers. The alchemist Aydamir al-Jildakī is not well known outside the small circle of scholars dealing with Islamic alchemy, nor is the Durrat al-ghawwāṣ a canonical text. This is a pity, as in this work, al-Jildakī presents a worldview that seems to be typical not only of Mamluk Egypt, but perhaps also for wider areas of the Islamic world in the so-called post-classical age, when the occult sciences became much more mainstream. In this world, al-Jildakī's world and beyond, the Sufi path to God, Aristotelian theory of matter, Kabbalistic letterism, alchemy, and Orthodox Muslim scholarship are inseparably connected and fused with each other. Thanks.
Splendid. Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Regula. Okay, so I will close the recording, stop the recording, and we can go to the question, say immediately. So